Back here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight, it is Mock Draft Monday, the first mock draft post-season, post-Super Bowl. Seahawks with the last pick in the first round because they are your champs. This mock draft, courtesy of our very own Mike Renner, who will join us for the next hour here alongside his Pushing the Pile co-host, JP Acosta. I'm Chris Hassel, and I'll be pushing you guys through this. Beginning at number 1, and this is almost a slam dunk at this point, maybe definitely a slam dunk at this point, Mike. It's the Raiders taking Fernando Mendoza. Why do you feel like Klint Kubiak is the perfect head coach for Mendoza?
I think it's because of where Klint Kubiak's offense takes its quarterback. So like, it is a downfield passing offense, but it loves to attack that intermediate and middle of the football field. That's where Mendoza succeeds. I actually think outside the numbers is kind of where he's at his weakest, really attacking those distant areas of the football field, but he's so good at navigating those windows between linebackers, between linebacker and safeties, and that's what he did so well at Indiana. And then in Klint Kubiak's offense, he's going to be asked to do it. So the Raiders, they got to be happy as heck. This is the most excited I'd be as a Raiders fan since like 2017, because Mendoza, I think, is that good of a prospect. And then the intangibles, all the off-field, the storybook season he had, it's a slam dunk, like you said.
You'd have to put down $700 right now just to get 10 for Mendoza to go number 1. That's how sure of a thing that is. Only one team held Mendoza's Hoosiers under 20 points this past season, and JP, it's a defense that was led by Arvell Reese, who Mike has the Jets taking at number 2.
And I'm really fascinated with Arvell Reese as a prospect. He is one of the 5 best prospects in this class, but I'm really curious about how the NFL views him. Do they view him as a pass rusher along the edge? Do they view him as an off-ball linebacker? I view him as a football player, meaning you just get him on the field and let him do what he does best, which is wreak havoc on opposing offenses. He's such a dynamic player coming downhill. He's a violent player when taking on blocks. He got 6.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. He's such a great QB spy. And I also think when you look at modern defenses and where defenses are going with positionless players, it's not exactly, the Isaiah Simmons of the world. I know that can be sort of a cautionary tale, but Arvell Reese has a position. He has the ability to play within the front 7, and he has the size and room for growth if you want to leave him on the edge in this defense to sort of have Will McDonald as your designated pass rusher. You can have Arvell Reese play on early downs and make him more of a dynamic threat and move him around when it comes to pass rush situations.
And this is obviously a draft where you're going to see a lot of differences at 2, 3, 4, 5, Mike, because you said that at the high value positions there isn't really a consensus that this guy is clearly the number 1 defensive edge. This guy is clearly the number 1 offensive tackle. Who do you have the Cards going with at number 3?
Yeah, I don't think this is like 2024 where there were no-brainers like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors sitting there for you that you just knew they were going to pick them, right? So there's a debate as who's the best offensive tackle in this class. I think Arizona, the best players at this point in the draft are either wide receiver or defensive end. But you look at their roster with the emergence of Michael Wilson last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., and all they spent in free agency on defensive end and through the draft the past couple of years, I don't know if they attack either of those 2 positions. I think Mike LaFleur wants to address this offensive line. It was one of their biggest issues last year. And Spencer Fano is, to me, the safest offensive lineman in this draft class. The Utah right tackle, which is, where he would play for Arizona. So he doesn't need to change positions. He stays there. Yes, he has limited length. We had this conversation last year with Will Campbell. We're still having this conversation today with Will Campbell. But to me, Fano moves better. He's a little bit longer arms, a little bit more prototypical frame. I think he can stay there. And to me, he's the best run blocker in this draft class. So for that reason, I think he will be coveted by Arizona here in this slot.
And when he's pass rushing, you wonder who he's going to be blocking for at quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. Let's go to number 4. It's the Tennessee Titans, and Mike says that they need an edge rusher here, but it's very tough between Rueben Bain, who we've seen go here a lot, and David Bailey. JP, what do you think of the decision to go Bailey here at 4?
I think Bain might be a little bit more of a better fit schematically and for what Robert Saleh likes in his edges, but David Bailey is going to test better than Bain at the combine, and that's going to matter a lot because David Bailey might have the most explosive first step among anybody in this edge class. He is so quick off the ball. That's how he got all those sacks. That's how he got all those pressures this season at Texas Tech. He has such a quick first step. He has a flurry of pass rush moves they can use to get around the corner. I do think he has a little bit of stiffness, and I worry about his run defense a little bit, but I think with his room to grow, there's still size to add to his frame, and when you get him around Robert Saleh, you get him around Gus Bradley, who's defensive coordinator, who's going to be focused more on just coaching up the defensive line, I do think that there's some opportunity for David Bailey to grow, and in this defense, they just need speed. They need impact players opposite Jeffrey Simmons, who is an all-pro caliber player. They need somebody for Simmons to flush out those pressures to, and I think David Bailey can be a really nice complement to Simmons.
Bailey and Bain, same position, Mike, but two totally different pass rushers. Why is that?
It's because Bailey is just a much more explosive athlete, and that's why I have him going here. I think, like it or not, the NFL, especially in the top 5 of the draft, they look for freaks. They look for upside. And when you look at Bain's testing numbers, you look at his arm length, you're not necessarily going to see that upside in the athlete. I think he's a better player. I have him higher on my board. But with Bailey, when he goes to the combine, when he runs that 40, when he does the vertical jump, when he does the broad jump, you're going to see it real quick. And so because of that, I think GMs just trend towards those type of guys, especially when you have the number 4 overall pick.
All right, let's round out the top 5 here with another new coach. It's John Harbaugh, first pick with the New York Giants. What makes Sonny Styles one of the best off-ball linebackers you've seen in recent memory, Mike?
Yeah, I've been going through final evals on these top guys throughout the week, and I think after watching Sonny Styles tape throughout this season, he is the best linebacker athlete I've ever scouted in terms of the physical boxes to tick. He ticks them better than anyone else I've ever seen. I think he's going to test like a cornerback in terms of his athleticism. He could break 4.4. I mean, this guy has unique physical gifts, and then he's built like a defensive end. I mean, he's got a massive wingspan. He's 6'4", 240. I have not seen a guy move like him. It's reminiscent of like a Tremaine Edmonds coming out of Virginia Tech, but his tape's a lot better than Tremaine Edmonds was. Edmonds went top 15. I think this guy could go top 5 given how good he was last year. He didn't miss a single tackle on tape this past year for Ohio State. There's a lot to like, and for a Giants defense that needs that help at the second level. They were so bad against the run last year because of those second level defenders. I think Sonny Styles is going to be a good answer for them.
This is our first post-Super Bowl mock draft from Mike Renner, and now our 5th new head coach in the first 6 picks. Todd Monken of the Browns, going offensive line, Kadyn Proctor. Now, we have him listed as an interior offensive lineman, potentially a guard. Mike thinks, though, that he can play tackle in the league. What about you, JP?
I think there's a lot of discussion for whether Proctor can play guard or tackle at the NFL level, and the biggest thing for the Browns is whoever or wherever he decides to play, you need help there. They need help at all 5 positions on the offensive line, especially considering the impending free agency / maybe retirement of Joel Bitonio. Jack Conklin may not be around for much longer. Proctor just gives them a very large, wide body as a run defender. He's an athletic guy who can move on down blocks. I worry a lot about his play in space, but I wonder if that comes from him playing a little bit heavy. If he plays a little bit overweight, I wonder if he tries to lose weight before the combine, and if that really affects his testing numbers. If he can run a little better, if he can move a little better at the combine, I might have a little bit more confidence in him. But I do think when he has that ability to hammer down on a lot of gap scheme runs that a lot of the NFL is sort of leaning towards in the modern offensive schemes that we're going to be seeing, I do think Kadyn Proctor is a really good shot for the Browns to take, especially considering that they need all the help they can get on the offensive line.
All right, moving on to number 7, where we find the Washington Commanders and our first playmaking position here. They took an Ohio State wide receiver back in 2019. That worked out pretty well for them in Terry McLaurin because he's still there. How about Carnell Tate here, Mike?
Yeah, they have to get younger at receiver. You can't go into this season with 2 30-year-old wideouts in Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel and think that that's going to be enough to get you over the hump in the NFC. We saw how anemic the offense got when they didn't have Terry McLaurin's vertical threat in that offense. This foolproofs that. Carnell Tate is the best vertical threat in this first round, or that at least the most capable. He has a great range in terms of his ability to make plays outside of his frame. Didn't drop a single pass this year, went 12 of 14 in contested catches per PFF. I think that's going to pair great with Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels, one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. He just didn't have anyone to throw to last year. Carnell Tate going to change that there. Maybe you can push back on saying they need help defensively. Yes, they do, but they have some cap space to play with to make those moves, and then they have rounds 2, 3, and 4 to make those as well.
All right, first wide receiver off the board, and now to a running back. And we've seen running backs go top 10 in 2 of the last 3 drafts. Mike has the Saints doing it again here at number 8 overall. How about Jeremiyah Love to New Orleans, JP?
This was going to keep getting mocked. I'm sort of going to manifest this one into existence. I do think that this is a really fun fit for Jeremiyah Love and the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara had a lot of injuries. He's also reaching that age 30 year where things get a little tricky for running backs, especially as they begin that decline. So I do think adding a guy like Jeremiyah Love into this offense, who is an instant shot of electricity in the Saints offense. He's an explosive play waiting to happen. He's one of the most creative runners at the second level that I've scouted before. And I do think he has a lot of opportunity to add as a receiver for Tyler Shuck, and I just think the Saints need to add some form of explosiveness to this offense, whether it be in a running back spot, whether it be at receiver. You have your quarterback. You need to try and find some ways to make it a little bit easier on him to move the football, and Jeremiyah Love is going to be able to turn those run blocking gains they're able to make with their offensive line. They're going to be able to turn them into explosives pretty easily. All
right, that's the top 8 in Mike Renner's draft. 25% of the way through this full 32-team first-round mock that we're going to run through here on HQ Spotlight. You see at the top, it's going to be Fernando Mendoza, number 1 to the Raiders, but after that, a lot of uncertainty. You had David Bailey going up at number 4 to the Tennessee Titans, and then our first playmakers at 7 and 8. Bunch of interesting teams coming up, like the Chiefs, Ravens, Rams, Cowboys. Who gets Arizona State wide receiver Jordyn Tyson? Back on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight, we are going through Mike Renner's first post-Super Bowl mock draft, and we've reached number 9. I'm Chris Hassel. JP Acosta is here as well. Mike and JP teaming up on the Pushing the Pile podcast. At number 9, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Can't believe they're picking this high after that season. And it's someone that fell in this draft, Mike. It's Rueben Bain, who I think you had him going top 5, 4 to the Titans a bunch, but why do you believe he would be a perfect fit in this Spags defensive system?
He's not going to be for everybody because he's a unique type of defensive end. He's 270 pounds, a little squattier build, and does not have long arms. Apparently, when he was measured in the spring, it was under 31 inches, which is that's about as short as it gets at the NFL level. But the Chiefs just last year drafted a guy who had under 32-inch arms, and Ashton Gelati, that a lot of people probably wouldn't have drafted because of that arm length. So they haven't really cared about it, and his play style is exactly what Steve Spagnuolo wants in a defensive end. He's a power end. He pushes the pocket. Steve Spagnuolo wants ends that will continuously collapse those pockets and just make life difficult on opposing quarterbacks, even if they're not necessarily leading to sacks. When you watch Bain's tape, he is so proficient at doing just that. And I think his ability to kick inside, rush inside on third downs can really be a value add to this Chiefs pass rush that's just kind of been dwindling the past few years as Chris Jones starts to age, and they really haven't added a meaningful guy to this unit since George Karlaftis.
We've had 3 Ohio State Buckeyes taken already in the top 9, and we're going to add number 4 here at 10 with Caleb Downs to the Bengals. Ohio State, 4 players here in the top 10. What do you think of a safety? This would be the first time, I think, in 9 years we would have a safety in the top 10, but how about him going to the Bengals, JP?
This makes so much sense for me. And if you want to consider Arvell Reese or Sonny Styles the best player in the draft, I do think Caleb Downs has a really strong argument to be in that conversation for the best overall player in this draft, regardless of position. He is a football player. His football instincts are among the best that I've seen at the position and in this draft class. His ability to read and understand space and understand route concepts is super advanced for a guy his age. He doesn't miss tackles. You can play him at nickel. You can play him at safety. And I do think the Bengals just need to get people who can tackle. Given how they struggled on the back end with tackling and missed coverage assignments, coverage busts, this feels like a great pick just to get some stability in the back end. And you have a guy that can be a future versatile chip in that defense. Like I said, he can play nickel, he can play safety. You just want to get him around the ball and see what happens.
That would be the first safety going top 10 since Jamal Adams 9 years ago, and Adams just transitioned to a linebacker. This would be the third straight year that a cornerback doesn't go top 10. But, Mike, you have that streak ending here at 11 with the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think cornerback's a position you can traditionally find later on in the drafts. I think NFL teams are figuring that out and maybe not using premium draft capital on it. But when I look at the cornerback room in Miami, and if I'm Jeff Hafley, I'm like, I want to get a guy right now. And I think this is a pretty good cornerback class. I like the top 3 guys in this class that we'll see come off the board. And Mansoor Delane, it's hard to argue with what he put on tape this past fall. He reminds me a lot this year of Devon Witherspoon in that for 3 years, he was kind of like a day 3 prospect, and then he comes back for a senior year and just looked like a completely different cornerback. He allowed only 14 catches all season long, was the best cornerback in college football, just a really high floor prospect. And for a defensive coordinator now turning into a head coach, he's a guy that can get you kick-started on the right foot.
And corners going back-to-back because, JP, he has the Cowboys taking a cornerback here at 12 that did not play last season.
Yeah, with Jermod McCoy, I do think it's really interesting how his draft stock is going to be evaluated because his sophomore tape is some of the best tape that I've seen from a sophomore cornerback in college in a long time. But I do think the Cowboys are a team that doesn't really care about injuries. I mean, they drafted Shavon Revel last season very high in spite of a torn ACL. McCoy is coming off a serious knee injury, but his eyes and his vision would be so nice in this new defense led by Christian Parker, who comes over from the Eagles. They play a lot of match coverage, a lot of quarters, and I think that Jermod McCoy can be a really nice start to revamping that secondary, especially with Trayvon Diggs out the door, with a lot of uncertainty in that cornerback room. You know that Jermod McCoy, when he is healthy, he is one of the best corners in the country.
Cowboys also have the 20th pick in this draft. Let's move to the Rams, the first of 2 picks for the Rams in this round. This is the pick that the Falcons traded on draft night last year. And, Mike, it's a wide receiver who has all the talent, but he just struggles to stay on the field each season.
Yeah, in terms of his tape, Jordyn Tyson from Arizona State is the best wide receiver in this class, in my opinion. You watch him get open just at will, but it's hard to ignore the fact that for 3 straight seasons, this guy has missed time with various different injuries. And that's going to be, you know, for teams when you're drafting the top 10, you want to be risk averse. You want a guy you know is going to be there. That could be a sticking point for a lot of teams. But for the Rams, who are just trying to figure out a way to get over the hump in the NFC, how do we face these top tier defenses you need to get through to get to the Super Bowl? We saw Davante Adams kind of transform this offense. This is your Davante Adams insurance plan and transition plan throughout the future to make sure your offense keeps humming even after he has to hang it up. He's a similarly tooled kind of player with his ability to get off the line of scrimmage. He just needs to get a little bit stronger and stay healthy. And if he does, he'll be a star in LA.
All right, we will move to the Baltimore Ravens then at number 14. They've got a new head coach, obviously, in Jesse Minter. And JP, they had issues on the offensive line last season, and they look to address that right here with Mike's pick.
Protecting Lamar Jackson has to be the #1 priority this season for Jesse Minter, and Francis Mauigoa is a really great start to that. I do wonder if teams view him as a tackle or a guard. I do think he has earned the right to at least try to play tackle at the NFL level, but in Baltimore with Roger Rosengarten already at right tackle, you slide him in at guard, and he immediately helps lift this run game back to the levels that we thought it was going to be at going into this season. He is the most consistent, the most reliable blocker in this draft class. His power when it comes to these double team blocks and duo, and something that I think a lot of what the Ravens want to be, is going to be really useful inside at guard. I do think some of his limitations come when he's faced with speed to his outside shoulder, but you limit that by having him inside at guard, by having a tackle next to him. I think his reliability, I think his durability is going to really stand out for the Ravens, and they just need to keep adding guys to that offensive line to help get Lamar Jackson the best group possible.
All right, let's recap it. 9 through 14 here, where we see our first cornerbacks go off the board and a safety, a rarity anymore to see a safety go in the top 10. Again, that would be the first in 9 years if Caleb Downs does go in the top 10, as Mike has him going to the Cincinnati Bengals there. And the 4th different player from Ohio State to be selected in this mock draft. In the top 10, a couple of teams have a couple of top 20 picks, and they're both coming up next. One of them will take USC wide receiver Makai Lemon. Find out who Mike has him going with next. All right, we're just about halfway through our first mock since the Super Bowl, a first-round mock from Mike Renner. We have JP Acosta along for the ride as well. I'm Chris Hassel. Let's get to the 15th overall pick. Mike, it belongs to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who don't have many needs, so who do you have them taking here?
Yeah, they really don't. They've addressed a lot of the biggest issues on this roster. And so I have them going for maybe not a high-value position, but one I think could pay off big dividends in left guard, Vega Ioane from Penn State. To me, he's the best pass-protecting guard in this draft class. Allowed only 4 pressures all season long, and if you're the Bucs and you've tied your wagon now to Baker Mayfield, you have to realize that he historically has one of the biggest differences in his performance under pressure versus not pressured. He is awesome when he's in a clean pocket and not so much when those pockets start to collapse. So to put a great offensive line in front of him is what's going to give you your best chance of success going forward. Ben Bredeson has not been great at that left guard position. You put Ioane next to Wirfs, and Baker really doesn't have to worry about his blind side anytime soon.
All right, from a team with not a ton of urgent needs to a team that has several needs, including a quarterback. But no quarterback here for the Jets as they become the first team to roll through with a second pick. Arvell Reese, number 2 overall. JP, what do you think of Mike having him take Makai Lemon here at 16?
This is another one I'm going to continue to manifest until it happens. Makai Lemon is one of my favorite players in this draft class, and he's going to be a guy that sort of defies the stereotypes for receivers. He's not the biggest. He's 5'11", about 190, 200 pounds, but he plays so much bigger than his frame. His ability to go up and get the ball through contact is super impressive. He can create in separation, especially in the short to intermediate areas, and I do think he's becoming such a refined route runner that I really do think he might be the best wide receiver in this draft class. He is a little bit limited to his slot, especially with how he was used in 2025, but I do think there's some room for growth, and I think he fits what the Jets need with already A.D. Mitchell and Garrett Wilson on the field and on the roster together. He blends what both those guys do together, and I think now that you have a good trio of receivers in Wilson, A.D. Mitchell, Lemon, you have that offensive line, you have a solid stable of running backs. I think whoever you put in at quarterback can at least get this Jets offense from off the ground floor to at least passable until you get your franchise guy. So I love this pick.
Yeah, good amount of weapons around whoever is going to be a quarterback if they indeed go that route and pick up a really good player in Lemon. The Lions are up at 17, Mike, and there's a question mark around Taylor Decker and his future. He might decide to walk away. Why do you think it's a good idea to address left tackle, even if he does decide to return?
Yeah, because traditionally, when you're in the middle of the first round, or they're hoping to be later in the first round next year, it's hard to find guys who can play right away. And I think even Lomu, I would not feel great about starting right away, the left tackle for Oregon this past fall. To me, he has all the tools to be a high-end pass protector at the next level. His feet are great. His hand usage is incredible. You see natural talent there. His play strength is just an issue right now. Play strength can be improved upon. We see guys routinely do it at the NFL level. He doesn't have too far to go, but if he were thrown to the Wolves right now, I think he would get abused a little bit. So hopefully Decker returns. Hopefully he can still get a Caleb Lomu, and then in year 2, year 3, that's when he's taken over, when he's really ready to keep that train going.
Crazy, the Lions finished last place in that division and end up picking ahead of the Minnesota Vikings, who are at number 18. What do you think of Colton Hood, the cornerback who left Coach Prime at Colorado, and then JP really had a nice season at Tennessee?
Colton Hood is probably a guy that Brian Flores would love to have in his defense, just on the demeanor that he plays with. He's very physical and press. I think he wants to get hands on you. He has long arms, and he has the ability to really disrupt receivers at the line of scrimmage. The production is there. He had a great season at Tennessee, even without Jermod McCoy. I do think there's a little bit of shakiness for Colton Hood, especially when he's in off coverage. I think that's where he sort of struggles. He struggled at the Senior Bowl a little bit. I think he rebounded towards the end before he didn't practice in day 3, but I do think that with the Vikings state of their defensive back group, outside of Byron Murphy, Isaiah Rodgers is going to be 29 coming up. I do think they need just some more depth, and Rodgers might be better fit for nickel than anything. So you have some guys with size and athleticism in Colton Hood, and I think that just really helps Brian Flores get back to being a press man alignment defense that he wants to be.
All right, we're going to start to get into the playoff teams now. The Carolina Panthers, a surprising playoff team from this past season at number 19. Mike, with this pick here, you say that they could put together the most physically imposing defensive tackle duo in the NFL.
Yeah, I have them going Caleb Banks, the Florida defensive tackle. The Panthers have quietly become a very analytically driven organization, and I think it doesn't take an analytics person to see that the final 4 teams, and specifically the final 2 teams this year, had elite defensive tackle units. I think the ability to stop the run with those guys up front is a big differentiator between the special defenses and just the good defenses nowadays. And so getting a Caleb Banks, who is very similarly built and tooled to someone like a Derek Brown, 6'6", 330. I mean, the guy is massive there on the interior, a great guy to learn from. He just needs to stay healthy because less than 100 snaps this past year, fewer than 1,000 for his entire career. But the guy is explosive. He's powerful. He could transform the interior of this Panthers defense. I think it would be a great fit to improve this Panthers defense.
All right, we just had the Jets with the first team to come up for a second time. Only 2 teams with multiple top 20 picks. The other one is the Dallas Cowboys, and here they are again. What do you think, JP, of Mike having them go offensive line in the first round again? This would be the 4th time in 5 years.
I do think that some Cowboys fans would really, really want to add to that defense, especially a pass rush. But I do think Blake Miller from Clemson is a really fascinating pick here. Given that Terrence Steele has a contract out coming up this season, and he hasn't necessarily been the greatest at right tackle, Blake Miller is a guy that you know what you're going to get. He's an incredibly athletic mover. I think he moves in space really well. He's got great feet. I do worry a little bit about how he handles power. He plays a little upright at times. That really affects guys getting into his chest. But I do think when you have a guy like Tyler Booker next to him at right guard, you're in that infrastructure of the Cowboys offense with Clayton Adams as your offensive coordinator / basically offensive line coach. I do think adding to the offensive line would really help sort of maximize the window that Dak Prescott has while he's still able to play at a high level. You're going to have George Pickens hypothetically back for this upcoming season. You want to go all in on making sure this offense will be one of the most dynamic and arguably the best in the NFL. So I do think adding Blake Miller here is a really fascinating pick, but I really understand it.
All right, 20 picks in now to our first mock draft after the Super Bowl. And we have had a few wide receivers go off the board now. The latest, Makai Lemon to the New York Jets. They, along with the Cowboys, with their second picks of this first round. You know what we haven't had yet? A second quarterback. But Ty Simpson might be the next best available. And there are quarterback-needy teams coming up, like the Steelers. Welcome back to our hour-long mock draft, our first mock draft after the Super Bowl, which saw the Seahawks dismantle the Patriots. We'll get both of their picks coming up in just a little bit. Mike Renner is the one who's put this mock draft together. He's joined by JP Acosta. I'm Chris Hassel. And so far, as we hit pick number 21, just one quarterback, and that was the obvious one, number 1 to the Raiders. But here we go with the Steelers. I don't know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, but they need a quarterback for the future. And, Mike, you've got him going there with Ty Simpson.
Yeah, even if Aaron Rodgers comes back, I still think you need a quarterback. And I think that's why they hired Mike McCarthy, truthfully, is because he has a fairly strong track record of developing quarterbacks. He has a QB school that he puts them through in the offseasons. He has a big focus of what he does. Everything he does offensively is around the quarterback position. He's been pretty good at it. So a guy like Ty Simpson, you've seen high-end ability on tape. You've seen creativity in throwing guys open. You see a big arm. You see a pretty solid athlete. You also saw a guy whose body broke down over the course of the season and was super injured by the end and got taken out of that game against Indiana that they ultimately lost. So I do think Simpson's going to be a unique prospect, only 1 year of starting under his belt, but desperation often wins out at the quarterback position, and hard to see many teams more desperate right now than the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right, moving to number 22. It's a Chargers team that was decimated by injury, specifically on that offensive line this past season. If you get them healthy, maybe you feel pretty good there. So you go defense here. JP, how do you feel about them going with a defensive lineman that we have ranked number 1 in Peter Woods out of Clemson?
If Peter Woods goes to the Chargers, I do think this could be the biggest return on investment for in the first round of this draft. I do think that there's some questions on how motivated you can get him to play after a really down 2025. But in 2024, he had 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He was an instant impact player as a freshman. You don't get a lot of guys like Peter Woods with that impact and the combination of power and quickness on the interior. I do think if you can just get him to focus a little, get him to lock in a little bit more, especially in that defense where you can have him just be a penetrator and immediately wreck pockets. That could really help sort of transition this Chargers defense into a new era up front. They get a little younger, they get a little faster, and if Khalil Mack decides to hang him up, you do get another core player in Woods and Tuli Tuipulotu on the defensive line.
All right, another player coming up next that's ranked first among his position group, and it's a position group that hasn't had a pick yet. Tight end Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon to the Philadelphia Eagles. Mike, we've seen rookie tight ends make huge early impacts the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, to me, Sadiq is the perfect movable tight end too. You know, everyone's running this 12 personnel. Everyone wants to get that second tight end out there to get defenses to match with base coverage. And then if they do that, and you get Sadiq on a guy who's a linebacker, he is going to outrun a linebacker. He's going to outrun a safety, truthfully. This guy is super explosive, and what I love about him is he can actually improve the Eagles' run defense. Dallas Goedert's a free agent this offseason, but even if they re-sign him, he can be a guy who, as a second tight end, because they've run so much of that. I don't know what Sean Mannion's going to do, their new OC, but Nick Sirianni has loved getting the 2 tight ends on the field. They've never had a second tight end who's actually a good blocking tight end there in Philadelphia. Sadiq is awesome out in space. He crushes people when on the move. That's what you want to turn this run game around, because it was anemic for much of this past fall.
The big trade last year was made by the Jaguars and the Browns as the Jags went up to get Travis Hunter. Well, now the Browns have a second pick at number 24 and a chance to help Hunter's former teammate and good friend Shedeur Sanders. They already got him Kadyn Proctor earlier in the draft, and Mike has him going with a wide receiver here in Denzel Boston, JP.
Yeah, I like to call Denzel Boston the king of the over route. He is such a good receiver on those crossing routes. He's great at going up and getting the ball, especially in jump ball scenarios. He's the son of a former NFL player, David Boston. He has the size and the arm and the hand strength to win in contested catch situations. He's not exactly a burner vertically, but I do think he has enough burst to make teams consider his speed, especially in the short yardage areas. He's not exactly a yards after the catch guy either, but I do think he fits for what new head coach Todd Monken wants to be offensively when it comes to getting explosives. Explosives via crossing routes, explosive via going downfield, and the fact that he can go up and get the ball the way that he does. I mean, we saw what Alec Pierce was able to do for the Colts this past season. I think Denzel Boston can have that same impact, and I actually do think he's becoming a little bit underappreciated as we continue to go on through this draft cycle. I think this would be a really good pick for the Browns to get somebody who can turn those 50-50 scenarios into more 60-40.
Browns the last of 3 teams with a second pick here in the first round, assuming there are no trades from here until draft night. The Chicago Bears up at number 25. They had a great breakthrough season, but there were some glaring holes, and the biggest one had to be on the defensive line, Mike, and the inability to get any kind of pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, they just didn't have disruptors along that defensive line this past fall. Bottom 5 in terms of pressure rate. And, you know, they made up for it by making a ton of plays on the back end, right? A lot of forced fumbles, a lot of picks. But you'll get more of those if you actually can pressure the quarterback. And that's why I have them going Lee Hunter, Texas Tech defensive tackle, who was as disruptive a defensive tackle as existed in college football last year. Now, he's a little boomer bust. He's a guy who will get upfield one play and then he'll be pushed off the ball the next play. But the Bears just need that guy who can get up into the backfield consistently. And if you've watched his tape at UCLA all the way through Texas Tech, there's one thing that I'm sure of with Lee Hunter. It's that he can get into the backfield. He's explosive, he's twitchy, he's violent. He's really all the things you want from a playmaking nose tackle.
Bunch of teams with new head coaches, 10 of them in fact. Most of them are bad teams that are looking to rebuild. The Buffalo Bills are not one of those teams. I mean, they feel like they're just a couple pieces away from winning the whole thing because they have Josh Allen. But they don't have somebody to stretch the field here. JP, they've taken 1 wide receiver in the first 3 rounds of any draft, the entire Josh Allen era. It didn't work out, Keon Coleman, or it hasn't yet. But how about KC Concepcion out of A&M going to Buffalo?
Look, the Bills just need people who can create separation from opposing cornerbacks. And I think with the way that this roster is built at the receiver spot, they have a bunch of specialists. Khalil Shakir does a lot of the yards after the catch, a lot of screen routes. Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore feel very similar in players. And then Josh Palmer and Keon Coleman are sort of similar as players as well. But KC Concepcion brings a different style, a different flavor to this receiver room if they draft him at 26. I do think he's an instant separator. He's got some of the best ability to sink his hips and stop and start in this draft class. After transferring from NC State to Texas A&M, they ran him a lot more on real receiver routes instead of what he did at NC State. I am very worried about his drops, and I do think that's going to be something that he has to continue to work on when he gets to the NFL level. But you take a chance on somebody with the explosive capability of Concepcion, especially when you look at where the Bills have really lacked in that receiver room. You just need somebody who can create some separation and go turn a 10-yard route into a 15, 20-yard explosive play.
Yeah, that drop rate definitely a concern, over 10%. Mike, you go back-to-back Texas A&M players here at 26 and 27 with the 49ers.
Yeah, I have them drafting Cashius Howell, the defensive end there, back-to-back first-round defensive ends from Texas A&M, going here after Shamar Stewart last year to the Bengals. But to me, Howell's the exact opposite end of the spectrum. This guy knows how to rush the passer. He is a day-one impact pass rusher, double-digit sacks this past year for the Aggies. And look at the 49ers. They drafted all run defenders last year, basically. Rounds 1, rounds 2, rounds 4 along the defensive line, all guys who specialize in run defense. And then they had the fewest sacks in the NFL. They need someone who can get after the passer. I think Cashius Howell is that guy, because when Nick Bosa went down, it was just curtains for that defensive line. They couldn't get after anyone. Howell will change that, and change that quickly.
All right. That's the 49ers at 27 as we look back at our second quarterback off the board at number 21, with the Pittsburgh Steelers taking Ty Simpson in Mike Renner's latest mock draft. And the wide receivers are coming once again. That's 5 now. 5 wide receivers off the board in this first round mock. Another one on the way. We've only had one player from the national champs. It was the number 1 overall, Fernando Mendoza. But how about Omar Cooper? He's going to land somewhere. All right, let's finish up our first mock draft post-Super Bowl. I'm Chris Hassel with Mike Renner and JP Acosta. This is Mike's mock draft. You can find the whole thing and explanation and article at cbssports.com. Up at number 28, we have the Houston Texans and a totally revamped offensive line last season, but still work to do, JP. What do you think of Mike giving them Georgia tackle Monroe Freeling?
The Texans just need to add 5 warm bodies to their offensive line this upcoming season. They need to get people who can really focus in on the run game, especially as they sort of struggled in run and pass protection. But I do think Monroe Freeling has a really good chance to be the best pure offensive tackle in this draft class. He has the requisite size, the length. I think his movement skills are really good. And I also think there's a lot of room for growth. He only started 16 games in college. I do think sometimes his hands are a little too low. It catches him lunging a lot, and I think that's going to get a lot better when it comes to NFL coaching. But when you look at what the Texans need on that offensive line, you draft Freeling, you can move Ariante Ursary to right tackle if you want to. You can have Freeling play right tackle, but you just need to get the 5 best offensive linemen out there, because you can't have what happened this past season with an offensive line that everybody knew was going to struggle, continue to drag down what was one of the NFL's best defenses. So I think I really like this pick of Freeling here.
All right, let's move on to the LA Rams at number 29. We talk needs, we talk fits, and some guys fit in certain places better than they would others. Mike, this is a cornerback pick here that some teams may shy away from, but the Rams will welcome. Why is that?
It's because he's undersized. Avieon Terrell out of Clemson. He's listed at 5'11". If you know anything about how colleges list heights for guys, if you're listed under 6 foot, that means you're probably 5'9". And you look at him on tape and he looks pretty short. So he's AJ Terrell's brother. He has the bloodlines to play corner. And when you watch him, he is so smooth, so skilled, and so physical. He's had 8 forced fumbles the past 2 seasons. And if you look at the Rams and historically their scouting method, they don't have size cutoffs. They don't really care about those sorts of things. They just care about, can you play football? And you watch Avieon Terrell's tape, and there's one thing I'm certain of. He can play football. I love watching him play, and I think he will fall to this point in the draft because of that size. And if the Rams are there, they would love to take him because he is a ball player. And the Rams had Jordyn Tyson with the 13th overall pick earlier in the draft from Mike. Let's move on to the Denver Broncos at 30. And they get somebody off the national championship team. Usually the national champion has more than 1 or 2 first-round picks. Fernando Mendoza, 1 to the Raiders. JP, how about Denver getting this guy who can catch it and pick up some yards after the catch in Omar Cooper?
That's exactly what the Broncos need in Omar Cooper Jr., somebody who can create after the catch, especially if this offense is still going to be a little bit limited in terms of creating explosives downfield. They need somebody with some juice, and Omar Cooper Jr. has all of the juice when you watch Indiana through the air this season. He's got a lot of ability to make a lot of catches outside of his frame, which is pretty cool for a player that's sort of not exactly a 6'2", 6'3", like massive player at receiver, but he has the ability to make catches outside his frame. He has the ability to make people miss, especially in short yardage scenarios. And I think he's growing as a route runner in those short area situations. But when you look at what the Broncos need in terms of explosive play capability, you thought you were going to get that from Marvin Mims. You didn't really get that at all. But I do think Cooper can be a really nice complement to Courtland Sutton, to everything else that they have. And Sean Payton would absolutely love drawing up some really cool plays for Omar Cooper Jr. to get the ball in space.
All right, last 2 picks. This is what we were waiting for to do our first post-Super Bowl mock draft with the Patriots pick 31st or 32nd. They seem to be a long way from 32nd when watching that offense last night. Seemed like they had some offensive needs. Mike, why are you going defense, though, with this pick?
Because I think the only offensive linemen here, which is obviously I think where their biggest needs lie, would be projects. They're not guys who are going to make an immediate impact for your football team. And so if that's the case, get a guy who can, because it looks like you're in a window where you can compete right now. And to me, that's Jake Golday at linebacker, because he's one of these modern linebackers that kind of bridges the gap between off-ball and edge rusher. He actually started his career at edge rusher before moving off-ball, and he still can rush the passer like that edge while running like an off-ball linebacker. He has great size, great sideline-to-sideline ability. I think he can be one of these movable chess piece off-ball linebackers that every defense loves in the NFL because offenses don't know how to handle him. Jake Golday's that kind of guy and would just help out what's already a pretty sick front seven.
You want to talk about a sick front seven, a sick defense, the dark side, the Seattle Seahawks, maybe getting even better here with this pick from Mike. JP, what do you think of the Seahawks adding Anthony Hill to that defense?
This one's fascinating. Anthony Hill Jr. is one of the most talked about players in this draft class at linebacker. I do think that he has the athleticism to really be a factor, especially in Mike Macdonald's defense that weaponizes their linebackers better than anybody else in the NFL. Hill does have some flaws, especially when it comes to his vision. I think that sometimes can get messed around with, but when you learn from Ernest Jones, when you're playing in a Mike Macdonald defense and you're playing behind that front seven, I think his athleticism will really stand out in Seattle. So I really do like this pick.
All right, let's recap our latest picks, our last picks of the first round. We only had 2 quarterbacks go. Ty Simpson was the only other one besides the Heisman Trophy winner. Simpson going number 21 to the Steelers. We only had 1 running back as well, Jeremiyah Love, who went early on in this draft, number 8 overall.